Okay, welcome to week 4 of Shipwrecks and Submerged Worlds. We're almost at the end of the course, but we've had lots and lots of questions coming in. We've also had a lot of new people joining the course this week, which is absolutely great. I think we've had quite a few people who've joined who are paddy divers, so welcome to all of you. But we're going to crack on with some questions. So the first one relates back to week 3 of the course. Catherine Emmett, a retired teacher from the UK, has asked a question which I think is for you, Fraser. So where are we in the Milankovitch cycles now?
It is a very good question, and as you may have got from the step on the course, that we can have a degree of certainty at predicting that, looking at the pattern of moving between glacials, non-glacial periods going back in time. And if you look at that, it does show that we're moving towards a period of heightened or sort of congruence between these that should be shifting us closer towards a glacial period. The big question is how much will anthropogenic activity impact on the temperature changes that we see. So if you want to know more, I can highly recommend the website of NASA and their work or explanations there on Milankovitch cycles. So that's really good.
Brilliant, thank you. So the next question then is from Ariana Pachechi in Chicago. And she said, out of curiosity, I also looked at the maps near the African Great Lakes region. So this is in the Exploring Sea Level Change step. And I was surprised to see there's no evidence of them even as early as 6,000 years ago. And I was under the impression they were formed due to tectonic shifts, which will eventually disconnect the Horn of Africa. I thought this was an old and very long process. Does anyone have any more information about how they were formed and when they first appeared?
So you've actually picked up on a really big weakness of the models that we put up. So those are simple eustatic renderings of how the geography of the world has changed if we look at broad scale sea level changes. What they don't account for is the impact of tectonics, and as such what you're seeing really is a coarse representation of what paleogeography might look like, and doesn't account for changes such as the formations of the lakes, but also things like big changes in the environment. So as some commentators have noted and we've responded to, we had things such as the greening of the Sahara if we go back to the earlier mid-Holocene, and areas like the Gobi would have been much greener too. So the maps we put up are really the sort of the way that we can explore the coarser resolution renderings. But if you want to understand the particularities of the environment, then you have to drill in and do a little bit more research and begin to think about the other factors, such as tectonics, as you say, which could radically alter an area. So they're a good starting point, but as we like to say, all models are wrong, but some are useful to think with.
Excellent, thank you. So moving on to the step on maritime traditions and skills, can anyone recommend sources that focus on the use of decoration and the arts, so sculpture, painting, weaving in shipbuilding? So Rodrigo.
Yeah, well, there's a very interesting book that came out in 2011, edited by Fred Hawker on the Vasa, and he focuses on the whole ship. But one of the chapters goes specifically on sculpture, painting, and shipbuilding decoration on the Vasa. So that is a very interesting book. You should definitely pick up on that. And there's another one that might be of your interest by Andy Peters. It's focused on ship decoration, also on the Vasa. So you can start out there and maybe move on to a different one.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so then we've moved on to the step on Tibber and Vig. Simon Hodgson said, when would gold have first been recognised as an important subject of high status and value? So, Rodrigo.
Right, so gold appears very early in the archaeological record because fortunately, when you find gold, you don't have to treat it too much to get that final appearance. It's very shiny. It's very people tend to look for this because it's easy to manipulate as well, to make different artifacts with gold. So that happens all over the world, and that's why it's such precious metal, and you can find it on the archaeological record.
We find there's an amazing site called Varna, which is a Neolithic cemetery on the Black Sea coast, which has stunning use of gold from Neolithic context. And it is because of this amazing ability that gold doesn't tarnish, and so it keeps its shiny quality. And so whether it was valued in the same way that we might think of gold is something that we have to think about very carefully. But yeah, gold was certainly, people realised it was shiny and interesting from relatively early on.
Yeah, there's a very interesting museum in Colombia called the Museum of Gold, and it's unbelievable amount of archaeological material that was made out of gold. So that might be of your interest as well.
Okay, so the next one is more of a comment than a question from Susan Brett. And she said that marine archaeologists ought to make their work more widely known through television. So, Danny, can you comment on this one?
That's absolutely true, and I think pretty much every maritime archaeologist would love to be able to make their work more widely known through television. But one of the big problems is that we're not the ones with the money who make the television shows, and so it's very much a case of what producers in the entertainment industry want to make. There are, though, some really, really good documentaries out there that are still being made, and that come out sort of every year. There's some great things. And if you look historically, there's television shows like Chronicle that are absolutely wonderful, and even in the UK, shows like Coast that often feature maritime heritage. So. I think the best thing I can suggest is to vote with your remote and watch television and watch documentaries that focus on good, sound maritime archaeology programs, and give the other ones a miss.
Okay, so next one, a tricky question. A lot of people sort of phrase this in slightly different ways, but Sarah Williams said, can one of the team explain why neither the US nor the UK have signed the UNESCO Convention? So.
Absolutely. So we'd agree this is a very good question, and it's one which it's not again out of the question, because it is a complicated issue where a number of countries have had issues to do with the description of national boundaries and how it relates to ownership and concepts such as that. So we're obviously very much in favour. There are enough now that there have been significant signatories to the convention to give it weight. Obviously we'd be in favour of the US and the UK signing up, but there are different interest groups who have different readings on this, and they will voice their concerns to legislative bodies and their representatives, and this is where these conflicts come in. So it's a long process, but we are seeing attitudes change through time, and so we'd hope that change would happen, but it's one which is driven by people asking for that change to happen. So if you want to know why, ask your MP, why haven't we signed up?
Okay, so 416, professional, amateur or archaeology for all. Gordon Dine asks, is it just me, or is there an almost evangelical zeal to some of these articles?
Well, we get very passionate when we talk about maritime archaeology. I think that's probably come through from a lot of our writing that we've put up, a lot of our blog posts, and also from the conversations that we've been having here. So I think the best way to just say is that you just have to understand that we are passionate, and when we start talking about aspects like ethics and conservation and UNESCO conventions and so on, it brings out the passion in us.
And I think it's fair to say at times we do want to help people see things from our perspective, so we want to persuade people, and we might want to see a change in people's ideas. So absolutely we can be slightly evangelical, because we're looking to see people potentially engage with and think about it differently.
Yeah, but it's very interesting to have different points of view from people that are not archaeologists, because they give you a complete different perspective, and it is always very welcome.
Absolutely.
Like that, yeah.
Academia thrives on it. It'd be very dull if we all agreed. There'd be nothing left for us to do. So I think this is where we're actually keen that if people disagree with us or have a different standpoint, that is where these things need to be discussed and made open to people, so they can make their own mind up in an informed way about what they think. So we have very clear opinions, but that doesn't mean that you have to agree with us, but we have to be able to articulate and discuss these and consider the merits of each argument.
Okay, then final question was, how did the University of Southampton purchase the Grastur for £5?
So this can sound a little bit more like the consumption of heritage than it is. So this is actually sort of more of a legalistic transfer of ownership that's moved when the Ministry of Defence recognised that it was in possession of a large heritage asset that was actually quite complicated, and their day-to-day business was more to do with the current hardware associated with the Navy, rather than something with this depth, but also value and interest. And the university was in a position to be able to say that for a nominal sum that they could consider how to look after it in a different way. We should also point out that it is a protected wreck under UK legislation, and so actually the major thing is its relationship with Historic England and the appointed licensee for it, the person who has access to apply to do surveys and visit the site. And in this instance, that is actually John, who you have seen talking about seafaring in this context as well.
Okay, well that brings us to the end of all the questions that we've got this week. I know there are lots of other questions still coming in on the course. There's lots of people who've recently joined us. But other questions that have come up from people are what they can do next. And obviously we've answered some of that in the course, suggesting further steps. But I'm just going to ask, if you want to make any recommendations of what you think people could do now the course is finished, what they might want to do next.
Well, you can join different associations. You can go straight to the NAS, which they take volunteers from different places. They take divers. They take people just have general interest in archaeology. So that's a way of joining. You can go to the Maritime Archaeological Trust as well. So those are both really good institutions in the UK that do a lot of public outreach.
Oh yeah, and it's a term that gets used a lot, and maybe at times slightly tritely, but this idea of citizen science is very important. There are far more people out there interested in the maritime past than there are in universities or even in commercial archaeology. So you can do a lot, even if you're not diving, if you're staying at home. Most of my time is spent in my office thinking about things and doing desk-based research. So there's a huge ability to engage with maritime resources from your home.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's also really good if you have a local museum. They're always looking for volunteers and people to help go through the archives there, people to help work with other groups and so on. So definitely check out your local museum. No matter where you are, chances are they'll have some sort of maritime stuff for you to do there. And
and if you're a diver, if you are lucky enough to be a diver and you see something, just following that classic look, don't necessarily touch or record where it is, and let someone know what you found and why it might be interesting. But perhaps, as most training agencies say today, you leave the things where they are and you record them and you let people know, and that way research can keep moving forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Well,
Thank you.
that brings us to the end. So thank you very much for everyone who's joined us on the course. Please do visit the course blog. If you want to sign up, then obviously you can follow that and receive other updates. And we've got our Twitter account at UOS Shipwrecks. So there are lots of ways that you can keep following what the team is doing even after the end of the course. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
bye.